Africans see African Americans as Africans. You're going to have people that say, oh, Africans don't see African Americans as Africans, they see us as foreigners. I've been to the African continent. I've lived on the African continent. I studied at the University of Johannesburg for an exchange program. One of the questions I was constantly asked was, where are you from? I'd say the United States. They would ask me, where are you really from? They're implying an African country. Because as a Black American, when you are on the African continent, Africans don't know you're from the States until you start speaking. They assume you're just another African. So I would have to say a region in Africa because I'm not sure, because of the slave trade. But because we as African Americans, as well as Afro-Caribbeans and those in the diaspora, are Black, we blend in. This is why I don't like this whole African versus African Americans versus Afro-Caribbean. Y'all acting like if we dropped y'all in Nigeria, if we dropped y'all in Haiti, if we dropped y'all in the Bahamas, that they finna know you from the States. Yeah, when you start talking, they're gonna know, okay, he has an accent, where is he from? But until that point is asked, you just another African person walking around in the society. Just like you got this debate between African American culture, Afro-Caribbean culture, and African. Like we don't exchange from one another. Like you a Black American ain't African, but you eating yams and okra all the time. You an African who said we ain't got no connection with African Americans, but you listening to hip hop and Afrobeat. You say you ain't Afro-Caribbean, but some of your ancestors come from the Barbados and Haiti, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. Well, Jabari, we weren't born there. We aren't from there. They're going to know we're different. Yeah, just like a Black person from Mississippi is different from a Black person in Ohio. A Black person from the Bronx is different from a Black person who's from LA. A Black person from Enugu is different from a Black person in Kano. A Black person from Johannesburg is different from a Black person from Cape Town. Quit the unnecessary divisions. Africans see African Americans as well as other members of the diaspora as Africans. That don't mean it's kumbaya. It means we are part of the African family whether or not you live on the continent or abroad. I will go even further and say African American along with Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Latino culture all are a part of African culture. They are subsets unique to their own circumstances. And y'all can rep your culture. Because that's what makes African culture special.
As an African who was raised in America, I saw both sides talk bad about each other by using these stereotypes that neither side created. Neither of us created these stereotypes about each other, but then we want to use these stereotypes against each other as if we're winning some kind of war. We are losing a battle when we start going against one another. It's like we're mad at each other for the fact that we got separated at some point in our ancestry. How are we mad at each other for the fact that we were separated, we were raised differently, we were cultured differently, and we were taught to believe different things, but yet we're taking it out on each other? We know our history. So we influence each other. We influence each other in the past, and now we're influencing each other in the present, and we're going to influence each other again in the future. So we need to cut the shit out. It's like sibling rivalry.
Okay, but can we really talk about this, please? So I am first generation. Both of my parents are from Liberia. I was born and raised in the United States. So I got to witness firsthand both sides of this argument. So the thinking in a lot of different African cultures is that Americans are lazy. They live off the government. They don't value education. They don't take anything seriously. And the reason they think this way is because in most African countries, you have to pay for school. So they feel that people who have the opportunity to get a free education should be much further in life. And while it seems simple and straightforward to them, they don't really understand the institutionalized racism and the systems that were put into place to make sure that people don't succeed. Because they didn't grow up in this system, they don't really understand how it works, which makes it a lot easier for them to judge. Now, on the other hand, I was in school when everyone was being called African booty scratchers. And I'd always be like, but I'm African too. And they'd be like, you're not a real African. These would be the same people that say, oh, Africans stink, Africans always have attitudes, Africans are so rude. To understand is that people in the United States of America grew up watching stereotypes of Africa that are predominantly false. And the ones that were even somewhat true were not recent. So many people think of Africa and think of jungles and savages because that's what the US media promoted. When in actuality, Africa is thriving. They have infrastructure and cities and technology the same as we do in the United States. But if that was promoted on TV, people would want to go back there as opposed to staying here. So like the original poster said, we're having these conflicts off of ideas that are not our own, off of false narratives that were built to keep us divided. But I think if we actually took the time to listen and learn, we see that there are a lot more similarities than there are differences.
I always felt like Africa was for Africans. So when I see African Americans in America dealing with all these issues, my first question is, why don't they just go back home?
Where?
Back to Africa. Will they be treated fair? Will they actually be praised for who they are because of the fact that they're American? They'll get way better treatment. They can invest. No, it starts with a visit. How many African Americans do you know actually consider Africa as a vacation spot? I mean, when you look at the overall population of African Americans, a very few percentage would decide to go to Africa for vacation. Would even, just for knowledge, just to know where they come from, just to get an idea of what that is. It's so much fear installed into them that they wouldn't even want to even go there to visit. You mentioned Africa, they start shaking.
So I am so happy that you guys have heard from both sides. You've seen the Americans or the African descendants that came into the African continent, and you've seen the Africans that traveled and went to the Americas or the diaspora, and they all have different aspects of themselves. Like the one or the first man, the African American who came to South Africa, he was seen as any other black person, as any other African. And until he spoke, you know, people didn't really give any importance that much because they saw him as any other African. And the fact that they asked him where he was from, because maybe we feel like, okay, you're from the diaspora, but which country of the African continent are you from? And it's not like an insult. We just know that you must know which country you're from. We assume that you must know. And you know, I want to apologize maybe on their behalf because we don't really know what's really happening. Like, let's say facts, you know, let me just be open. And the fact that 𝗂𝗏 said every time African Americans in particular, you know, when you call them African, some of them feel like it's an insult in some way, and some feel like Africa is just one country, but it's a continent with 53 countries. Like, internet is around. Take the initiative and do a bit of research. Like, guys, let's use the modern day technology at least to understand ourselves. And I like that we are having these conversations because we get to understand ourselves. And the lady said about the booty scratching thing, I did not know what that was until I started seeing the diaspora wars. Another one said about the education system. A lot of us as Africans in Uganda, we pay for education. So when we see that you guys have the opportunity of free education, but you're not using the opportunity, maybe we are like, oh, you guys are lazy. You know, you just don't take the initiative, but we don't even really know that there's really big racism also in the education sector. But still, nobody of us as Africans or you black people wrote any of that information. It was given to us. So we think that way because it's given to us in the media. That's how we see you. And then you also see us in a different lens where you feel Africa is shitty still through the media. And also, if you are an African descendant in the diaspora, please, if you can try at least come to Africa and just visit, you know. Like 𝗂𝗏 said, some of you, when they call you Africans, you feel insulted, like it's an insult. And it's just not okay, really. I just don't understand it. Like also, 𝗂𝗏 said, some of you don't see Africa as a vacational place. Like when you think about going out, it's always Europe or Asia or any other place but Africa. But you guys, you need to understand Africa has the resources. Like we have everything. We have nature. Nothing can beat that up. Like in these other countries, you can go and see buildings. But when you come to Africa, you're going to see nature, you're going to see real people, you're going to see real things, you know. And I'm not trying to say all of you are rich, but those that can afford, Africa is always welcome to have you, right? And so I just want to let you know, like, we see you as one people, we see you as us, and just don't feel like we don't love you. And maybe some that come that side, some Africans maybe treat you badly, but like those are the few. The majority are in the continent. And so I just want us to have the conversations, love ourselves, and grow as a people. Like that's what I root for, and love is what is going to break us free. And I hope you like my new purple hair. Guys, that is it for today. I hope you like the video. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please share, comment, tell me what you think. Please support the channel. In case of any support, the links are in the bio. And yeah, I really appreciate everything that you're doing for me, guys. Thanks for loving the content. Let's have conversations. Yes, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.